Thanks everybody for joining. I'm Brian Toller. I'm not Mary Kay Woodworth. She has had her life rearranged by Delta Airlines. And so I'm going to be filling in for this part 3 of our UAC Financial Literacy series. And we're excited. We got PNC Bank back with us again today, and they've done a terrific job on our first 2 versions. These are all saved on our video and on the YouTube channel for UAC, so you can check those out at your leisure. We're excited about not only for this series, but we also have one for marketing that we've been utilizing. And so we encourage people to check that out as well. But what's really important to us too is that we have Proven Winners is a sponsor of not only of the financial literacy series, but also the marketing series. And y'all, they have these terrific videos. We're going to play one now. And then we also have one at the end of the webinar that you'll want to stick around for. I tell you, these things are absolutely fantastic. So here it is, 2020 Rose of the Year from Proven Winners. All right. Well, I told you it's pretty awesome. But hey, thanks again. We're excited that we have Nori Hernandez and Sean Vernon from PNC Bank. And we're going to turn it over to you guys, and I'm going to let you share your screen, and we'll go
Perfect.
from there.
Thank you all so much for joining us, whether it's via web or when we present this on the site. Or the individuals that are joining us today. Thank you so much for joining us for this. This is something that we really look forward to. Sean and I have discussed this for quite some time, and we love the opportunity to be able to share this information with you, because the truth is, this is some, I guess you can call it insider information, things that are typically not shared. I'm sure many have applied at institutions for financing. Perhaps maybe you received a response that not exactly what you were looking for, but it was kind of like, these are the reasons for the decline. But there was really no. There may have been, in some cases, may have been limited ability to show you exactly what needs to be done to prepare yourself. So we want to go ahead and take a preemptive measure and give you some information that can help you prepare for financing. So before we get started, I want to go ahead and just discuss some of the topics that we're going to go over. Obviously, Sean and I are going to introduce ourselves formally, and we're going to share a little random fact about each other, which is kind of funny. We want to discuss the importance of credit and the timing in which you obtain it, right? We want to understand what the significance of managing your credit scores. What does that look like? Key lending thresholds, which is really good information for anyone looking to apply for financing, whether you're planning of doing something right away, or you may have plans for something a couple of years down the road. A couple of steps that you may want to take: developing your tax strategy, which is still in line with preparing for financing. The importance of your journey and your story. I cannot stress this enough, how important that information is, and we'll go into detail with that. And Sean is going to share some information about agriculture business banking. Now, within some of this information, we'll also share some of the differences that have occurred since the pandemic started, which is going to impact all of us, some way, shape, or form. So we have Sean Vernon and myself. I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. So my name is Nuri Hernandez, obviously, as you can all see. Vice President of Business Banking Relationship Manager. I've been with PNC for a little over 3 years. I've been in the banking industry since 2001, kind of dating myself here. And a random fact about myself: at the age of 11, I learned to catch fish with my bare hands. It's actually true. It's a random fact. Many family members of mine can testify to that. But anyway, so Sean, I'm going to kick it over to you.
That's a good fun. All right. Good morning, everyone. And just like Honore said, just thank you for attending our seminar today. We really have a joy in being able to deliver these type of seminars and information to business owners and maybe potential future business owners, whoever may be viewing our seminar today. So just once again, thank you. And thank you to Urban Ad Council and Mary Kay for giving us this platform. So as my title states, Vice President, Food, Beverage, and Agribusiness Banker. So what I do, I work with clients in the ag space, and I will go into a little bit more when I discuss, the difference between my role and what we do here at PNC. I've been in banking now for 16 years, not as long as Honore, but a long time. And long enough, yeah. So between Honore and I, well over close to 40 years of experience between both of us. So fun fact, I won't say what Honore said because I've never caught fish on my hands before, but I will say this. At the age of 21, I met my idol, my idol, biggest idol in the whole world. His name was Dan Marino. I met Dan Marino, and mind you, for those of you that met me in person, I'm 6'4", and I won't say my weight. However, I was much slimmer. When I met Dan Marino, you would have thought I reverted back to a 5-year-old, watching him throwing touchdowns to Mark Clayton and Duper. And he was such a nice guy. And when I met him, he said, "Hey, nice to meet you, little guy." He was trying to be funny, but I told him that I was a fan since I was a little kid. That's my fun fact of meeting Dan Marino. Such a nice guy.
Awesome. That's actually pretty cool. Let's go ahead and continue the slides here. So why is credit important? Well, credit allows your company to purchase equipment or property while still preserving your cash position. So why is that even relevant, right? So many clients have elected to purchase many items in cash, whether it's equipment, property, whatever the case is, right? What that does is it restricts your cash position, because obviously you're using your cash, right? And that's also you also have to look at it from this standpoint. When a bank is making a decision on a loan, they're looking at a snapshot of a moment in time, and there's only so much information that's being gathered, right? So when we look at your cash position, if it's significantly lower than what it would be had you not purchased that equipment on cash instead of on credit, your cash position will be higher. And for us, it will look like, okay, this is more of a healthier business. This business looks a lot healthier because of its current cash position. And we're kind of gonna give you an example what that, some things that you may want to consider in the next, not the next bullet point, but the following, something to think about. Now, credit also helps you develop your credit history, right? It helps the business develop credit history, which allows you to obtain larger loans in the future. So one thing to consider is when many institutions are when they look at a potential borrower, we're looking at someone's credit profile, and not all credit profiles are created equal. So if you have one person, a client that has managed one credit account successfully for several years, that client or that potential borrower is not going to be looked at the same as someone who has managed 5 successful accounts for the same time period, right? Because we have to look at it as how much risk has this person taken on, and how have they been able to manage it, right? In terms of credit, in terms of dollars that's been lent to that client. So we do look at that closely. So now going back to why it's important to keep your cash position. Look, there's many other reasons, right? There's always something that's in it for the bank in terms of mitigating risk, right? But you also have to look at it from managing your business. So what happens if you find yourself in a situation where you see you're going through an emergency, but you also find an investment opportunity? How do you handle that? How do you attack that, right? So, for example, let's look at the current pandemic that we're in. Many businesses have seen a decrease in revenue over the last several months. Quite a few have rebounded, but those businesses who did not have the appropriate cash position, if an opportunity came about, would they have been able to purchase that building or purchase that piece of land to construct a warehouse or construct a new facility, or even acquire another business? So this way you can increase your client base and then increase your footprint, right? So can you do that with limited cash? No, you need your cash position to be solid. That's why it's very important to look at obtaining financing. Now, I'm not going to say financing is always the key. What I'm trying to say is just meet with your banker, meet with your accountant, and determine, what's the best move for you. And in many cases, it may be in your best interest to get the financing, preserve your cash in the event that you need your cash for something else in the future. All right. Now, also timing is very important, right? So I'm sure everyone here has heard the story, get financing when you don't need it. Well, you know what? It's true, right? Because when you don't need it is when you're at your strongest financially. When you look at your returns, you look at your financials, any institution is going to look at, you as a potential borrower, and the risk is limited. So because you're posing limited risk for the institution, for the bank that's going to potentially lend you the money, that's really the opportunity for you to strike and get that financing in place. Because in the event that the economy goes through a pandemic, which we're in right now, or a recession, you already have the financing in place. You don't have to go back and you don't have to necessarily go in that time and try to apply, because at that point, the guidelines will be a lot stricter. Things that may have been flexible in the past will not necessarily apply. So many institutions have recently changed a lot of their policies in terms of what they're looking for from a borrower, and which we'll kind of go over in the next couple of slides. So let's understanding managing your credit scores. Obviously, this is important for the obvious reasons. The higher your score is, the more likely you are to get financing, right? I think we've all understand that. But what's very important is how you manage it. And not all scores are created equal. So for example, let's just say if Sean and myself we both have a credit score of 720, right? Sean has a score of 720, but he has used about, let's say, 50% of his trade lines. In other words, 50% of his available credit. I, on the other hand, have a 720 score, but I only use 5% of my available credit. Now, the question is, why are our scores still the same if we have the same amount of credit, but I've used less? Well, I've had a late payment, and it's been recent. So a borrower is going to view that more negatively because of how recent it's happened. And now we have to look at, okay, why did that even happen to begin with? So are there any other risk factors that we need to look at to make sure if this person, if Anuri is a good potential borrower? Because as of right now, Sean may be in a better position, because all it's really going to come down to is, can he pay off the remaining balance on his trade lines? And if he's managing, like many businesses, they pay a lot of their balances in full before the month is over for certain cards that they have. Many companies do this, but what many companies don't realize is the information that gets reported to the credit bureau is based on the end of your statement balance on your credit account. So for example, if your statement cycle closes at the 31st of October, right? If you pay the balance in full before the 31st of October and you have a zero balance, your credit bureau will show that you have a zero balance on your card. But if you have a zero balance come the 28th, you purchase, let's say you pay you pay some vendors for whatever your materials you need, right? And let's just say you charge off $15,000. Please don't mind me, I'm just using a random number. $15,000. Come the 1st of November, you make that payment, you pay it in full. That balance is still going to show up on your credit report. So that's something to really consider, because obviously we see that credit score swing back and forth depending on the available credit that you have. So that's something really to take into consideration. All right, so key lending thresholds. So now we've already discussed credit. We've discussed, why is it important to get credit. Now there's a couple of things that you need to understand that we're looking at when we take a tax return and we start extracting some information, particularly numbers, right? So what is a debt service coverage? That is typically what we do is we take the income, the business cash flow, or should we say the net income of the business. We also take, we take the business net income, and we also take the business's debt, proposed debt, as well as existing debt, right? We take that number and we divide the income divided by the debt, as you see on the slide here, if you see on this portion here, right? In this case, this particular potential borrower came out with a debt service coverage of 3.51. Once again, your total income divided by your total expenses, which includes anything that you're applying for. So why is this important? The majority of banks are looking for a threshold minimum of 1.25, right? So now you tell me, does this look like this person passed? Of course, they're 351. So the risk is minimal. The key rule of thumb has, for me, whenever I sit down with a client, that we should always aim for 1.35 to 1.5, because there's always that little extra something that shows up, that extra expense that we didn't necessarily account for, may have been a larger balance on the credit card reported on the bureau, that may show up, that may alter these numbers, right? Because we had in this, the 32,622, we have to include all expenses for the business when it comes to financing expenses, not necessarily other business expenses, but mostly financing expenses and any other loans, credit card balances. That's what we're really including there. So that's the key threshold that we're looking for. Now, one of the biggest changes now that have happened with many institutions, that threshold, the policy threshold, has increased. Typically, the rule of thumb is 1.25. In some cases, we're seeing 2.5 for a brand new to bank client for several institutions. Some cases, 1.5. So something to really take into consideration. And this is specifically for someone who has not borrowed with that institution, right? So keep that in mind when you're crunching numbers with your CPA, and you need to understand where you need to be. So this is something that can be calculated rather simply. Now let's go. I'm sorry.
And a quick question. I don't know if you was going to do it. Did you want to explain the 1.25? What does it mean in terms of, the debt service coverage?
Yeah. That's pretty much what I was going through. So basically,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, 1.25 is basically your income divided by your debt. And once again, we want to see that you can afford you have enough to afford the loan. So if you get to 1.25, if this number comes out to 1.25 or greater, then you're in good shape to get an approval from that standpoint, because that shows us that you can service that debt, the additional debt that you're taking on. So now let's go to personal debt to income ratio. So obviously, a lot of us who've purchased a home, we've seen this, right? So typically we want to see a personal debt to income ratio of 40. And the reason why this is important is because we want to make sure that you have enough income personally to service your own personal debts, and we don't have to worry about the risk of you having to potentially take money out of the business to sustain your personal debts. So now the last piece here is the leverage calculation. All right. I'm sure many of us have heard this terminology, right? So what we're doing is we're taking the business's total liabilities. So we're taking every single loan that the company has on its balance sheet and any proposed loans as well. So, so in this case, right here, the total loans, total liabilities is $475,000, right? the company's effective net worth, we typically use the retained earnings that is on the balance sheet of a tax return. So we take the total liabilities divided by the company's effective net worth, and we get your leverage calculation. Typically, prior to COVID, the thresholds were 4.0, right? Max. Anything below that would be in great shape. Now, once again, if you're borrowing for the first time with any particular institutions, that number may be different. So that's something that whoever you're banking with, you may want to ask. I've seen in some cases, we've lowered it, it's been lowered by many institutions to a 3-to-1 leverage calculation. In some cases, 2-to-1. Now, the beauty of it is in your industry for PNC, this is a preferred industry, so you don't have to worry about being at a 2-to-1 leverage, which basically means your effective net worth has to be significantly higher. That number can be impacted. The effective net worth can be impacted by not leaving enough money in the business. So that's, once again, it goes back to having that conversation with your CPA and having that planning so that you can determine, okay, am I ready for financing? How long what's my timeline and what my plans are? All right.
Nori, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
So you said something a second ago about from a PNC standpoint that you're looking at a less than a 4.0. Right. Mm-hmm. So is that a PNC standard, or is that a kind of across the board, generally speaking, banking standard? I've reached out to a couple of contacts that I know at different institutions, and it's across many different institutions, many different banks. Okay. And this is more of a reaction to the pandemic that we're in. Many businesses have not are still struggling. Many businesses that are not considered essential businesses are struggling. So these are one of the reasons that many of these banks have taken these extra measures, because they're trying to they're being a little extra conservative, and I can understand there's a lot more risk involved, and they want to make sure that they protect their interests, for lack of a better way to say it. Okay, so, that's very helpful. And I want to ask you one more quick thing while I've got the mic here. Sure. You also mentioned these numbers being, I can't remember if you said they were pre-COVID or post-COVID. So can you kind of build on that conversation about, are these numbers what y'all would normally see and they've changed from this, or are these numbers that you see currently and they used to be something different? You may have said it. I apologize and I missed it. No, it's okay. It's okay. These are typically these are pre-COVID numbers. Okay. What's happened is many institutions have, and this typically goes across the board to many institutions, right? But different institutions have different thresholds now. Some of them are more silent thresholds, and it may be dependent on the industry. In some institutions, they may be more related to, do you currently borrow with us? Do you currently have a banking relationship with us? Right. Okay. So one of the reasons why it's kind of hard for me to give you a specific number, because everybody banks somewhere differently, and I don't want to make this solely a PNC thing. It's really, I'm looking at this more like, look, what can we do to help you prepare? Hopefully you'll reach out to me or Sean. That would be my hope. But at the same time, Sean and I really care about providing this information. So one of the things that you really want to find out, and you may not be able to get this information from unless you have a banker that you have a very strong relationship with, is you got to find out what the thresholds are. And they have changed. Before it was 125. For us, for example, it's still 125 for an existing borrowing client. Specifically if they're in the preferred industry. If you're looking at a supermarket or a contractor, even if they borrow with us, the debt service coverage is not going to be 1.25. The leverage calculation is not going to be a 4.0. For a non-preferred industry, for us, we're looking at a 2.0. Flat out, whether you borrow with us or not. But our preferred industries are agriculture, medical, other key professionals, right, and manufacturing.
When I say other key professionals, will be attorneys, accountants, engineers. So that's something to consider.
And the 1.25 to a Nori point, it's pretty standard across the industry, definitely before COVID. And I worked at a few different banks before, and 1.25 has always been the debt service coverage in our industry. But also to piggyback on what Nori was saying, it all depends on the industry and the segmentation. I'm playing my clients that are landscapers and nurseries, and just pretty much in the greens industry. And I'm quite sure you probably have heard as well, Brian. And Mary Kay heard as well. They've done well during the pandemic with COVID, as opposed to other industries that have been facing some hard times. So once again, it is industry specific, and and I'll go into that a little later. But I just want to just piggyback and just confirmation in terms of what Honori is saying in terms of your question.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, you're welcome. Just also keep in mind that some institutions, their credit culture is typically very conservative. So that's something to really keep in mind. That'll kind of give you an idea as to how their policies may change. Sometimes you can just ask and you may get that information. Other times, it may be difficult for you to get access to that. But obviously, we want to help. So if you want to ask Sean and myself, if you have any questions, any inquiries about this, we'd be more than happy to answer questions for any of you. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. All right, so going back to the numbers that we just shared, this is why it's critically important to identify a tax strategy and determine your tax strategy. And you need to connect with your CPA and connect with your banker. And this should be a joint meeting. I typically recommend for us to have that joint meeting so that we're all on the same page and we can understand as to what the client is looking to do, but also understand, what are in their plans. This way the CPA is also aware of what their plans are, because I've seen instances where a client will come to me and tell me what they're looking to do in the next year, but the CPA is not necessarily aware of what the client is looking to do, from whether it's purchasing a building, purchasing equipment. In most cases, the equipment they'll understand, but purchasing a building and also the timeline, right? Timeline is also very important in what you're looking to do this. This is why it's very important you sit down with your CPA, because there are some things that are going to be written off, and things in terms of reducing your tax liability. And what are the impacts of that, of reducing your tax liability? I remember I had a situation where I sat down with a client last December. He was looking to buy a building, and he was a little ambitious in terms of his purchase, but he didn't realize what the cost would be for him. And in terms of him having that exponential growth without reducing his tax liability. So his accountant was able to share with him, look, you can, but we may not be able to write certain things off, and this will be your tax liability for this particular year. Client paused, and he was able to make a decision right then and there. But at the end of the day, we're all on the same page. So it was determined that, let's plan this for 2 years out rather than 1 year out. But at least there's a plan in place, right? Also, you want to try to anticipate any future needs. It's typical where if you purchase a piece of equipment, the equipment has a certain lifespan. You may look to purchase another piece of equipment close to the end of the lifespan of that equipment. But there's other things that you can plan for that you may be able to project. Like, look, let's just say you already purchased your building, your business is growing, and you're starting to see yourself outgrow that space. Then you need to start planning for a larger piece of property. If the business is growing, your profits are growing, and you're 15,000. Let's just say, I'm going to make a number up. A 15,000 foot square foot warehouse is no longer going to be enough. You may have to look at a 30 square foot warehouse. You have to look at those options. And from what I'm seeing now, one of the biggest changes that we're seeing now, especially because of COVID, you may want to start planning some of these items 2 years out. And the reason I say this is because one of the biggest things that many underwriters are being caught up with right now is, can the business afford this debt 2 consecutive years? So what I mean by that is, right now we underwrite based on 2018 tax returns. So if you can afford it based on 2018 tax returns, that's great. It looks like we have a deal, right? But if the thresholds are not satisfactory in 2018, you can't afford it for 2018, but you could afford it for 2019. There is a possibility that that deal may not happen, particularly in the environment that we're in. So that's something to really take into consideration, that plan these things out. You want to be able to show that you can afford this for 2 consecutive years if you're making a significant purchase. Typically, that was a rule of thumb for any loan amounts over $1 million. But in this environment, even a loan or a credit line of $250,000, that can be an issue. So that's something to really keep in mind when you're performing your planning, or if you're looking at, hey, the business is growing, I got to get some financing in place. Okay. Any questions about that?
No question. It goes back to what Nori stated earlier in the presentation. Get it, apply for the line of credit when you don't need it, because in 2018, your numbers were, rock star numbers, phenomenal numbers, and what could have been an easier approval. Now, of course, no one didn't foresee, COVID happening. However, it's always good to have it when you don't need it, especially when your numbers are strong, because you just don't know. You may have a client where they're slow to pay, and then that can mess up your receivables, and then maybe that could throw things off for you. So when things are booming and going well, just don't say, well, hey, you know what? My liquidity is strong, I don't need it. No, that's the time that you should apply for it, because that's when you could get maybe a line bigger than what you need. So, or exactly what you need. So, it just really goes to the point of applying for the credit, even when you don't need it, just to have it there, in case of an emergency or something like COVID, I guess.
Yeah, and another tidbit of information to piggyback on that is, when you get the line, right, and you manage it appropriately, guess what? If you do go through a pandemic, the likelihood of that line being removed, unless we're in a severe recession where there were many knee-jerk reactions back in 2007, 2008, in many cases, we'll look at your history and we'll determine, okay, we should keep this, right? Because you have used that credit facility appropriately. So you want to make sure you have that, especially when the economy is performing well and there's really nothing to make any external forces that's causing a bank to start to get a little nervous, right? So it's something to keep in mind. All right.
This is Judd. I have a question regarding that. When you look at growth and managing a line of credit, how often would you recommend, or when do you think it's appropriate to try to increase that line of credit? Is there a level of use? If you're maxing out that line and repaying it every year, how would y'all like to see somebody using that to say, okay, I'd like to increase it so I'm staying at a threshold that only needs 75% of it, or what do you think's appropriate there?
Well, let's look at a couple of things, right? So if you're using the credit line, and let's just say it's been maxed out for 1 consecutive year or 2 consecutive years, and you're just making the minimum payment, it'll be very difficult for us to go back and say, okay, let's get an increase for this client, because now we have to understand, we have to assume, right? And this is the part that I cringe a little bit, because the truth is there are assumptions. We have to assume that you may continue to max out the credit line and you'll be indebted to us even more, right? And then we have to assume any other risk factors. But if, how you just mentioned, if you max out the credit line, but you also pay your balances down, and I'm not talking about the small payments, you're managing appropriately. So as you're basically, a credit line should be used as a bridge financing. So you perform a job, you're waiting to get paid, you use the credit line so you can cover your overhead. When you get paid, you pay down the credit line, right? And that's the common theme. And if you're constantly doing that and you're paying and you're cleaning it out completely at least once a year, but you're also making aggressive payments to bring down the balance, we're going to look at your profile and say, okay, this client is managing it well, and it is very obvious that this line may not be enough. And based on their growth, based on how they've used it, we need to consider getting an increase for this client. And what I would typically recommend is every time you have new financials, and when I say new financials, I mean one brand new tax return, right? So let's just say we get your credit line this year and we use 2019 returns to get you those returns. Even if it's, let's just say if it's in September, I mean, even this month, we get you something in October. Come February, when you get your returns done and you show a significant growth from 19 to 2020, yeah, we need to look at that. We need to look at that right away. So you don't necessarily have to wait 6 months to a year. It's just, if we have new financial information that we can use, we'll go ahead and go for an increase. All right.
Thank you.
Now one other piece of information to throw in there when it comes to increasing your credit line, something that I see pretty frequently, we have to look at how many, if there's any client that represents the majority of your receivables and of your revenue. Typically anything over 20%, we look at it as a concentration risk. If you're more than 20% of your revenue comes from one client, and if it's on your receivables, which we use as collateral, we will discount that client from your receivables. So for example, if your receivables are at 100,000 and we're going to lend you 80% of that, right? So that will basically mean we can lend you up to 80,000 for every 100,000, right? But if let's just say if $50,000 of those 100,000 receivables are to one client, we're going to remove the 50,000, and what you could have potentially received as an $80,000 line will now be a $40,000 line. Make sense? And that's the way we'll mitigate that risk. So something, just food for thought. All right. Now, the importance of your story. It is very important that we understand your journey. We understand how you got to where you are today. And the reason being is that because it helps give us an idea of exactly, how, what you've been through. Like, for example, did you survive a recession already, right? So part of your story, if your business has been in business since, let's just say 2005, you have survived the recession of 2008. And let's just say if COVID is done by, let's just hope that this whole thing dies down by the end of 2021 and we fast forward to 2022. Now you have survived COVID. So you have survived two negative things in history. So that shows that your business is sustainable. So that's one thing to look at. Why, what caused you to get into what you're doing today? Provide what has some information on what made you successful and what has set you apart from your competitors. Very important that we get that information because it helps tell a story to the underwriter, because it's not just about numbers, right? I mean, there's obviously a big component of it, but we need to have a story because that story tells us about your resilience. Okay. Any question about that? Comments, concerns?
Just to piggyback on that last piece you said, because one of the things about us, yes, we're your banker, but we're also your advocate, and we're advocating on your behalf to the reason why your application for your loan and your line of credit should be approved. Because once we look at the numbers, we're like, okay, this client is strong, and on top of the strength of the business, here's the story about this business. So it's more or less we're going to bat for you. And I know sometimes we ask questions, maybe sometimes you get clients, oh man, but there's truly a method behind the madness, and we really need to understand. It's almost as if we're a new partner in the business. So the better we can explain your story and the numbers, it's easier for the underwriters to go ahead and to approve your application request. Sorry, Nori, go ahead.
No, it's okay. It's okay, man. Because I think you're up next. So we're good.
Oh, perfect. I tee myself up. There we
It
go.
works for me, man.
All right, I'll jump into this slide here. Well, Nori, thank you for what you've already presented to us thus far. So once again, my name is Sean Vernon. Even though it says agricultural business banking, earlier this year we added a little bit more to it. Now it's food, beverage, agribusiness, agriculture, business banking. So it's the full gamut, farm to table, everything you could think that encompasses agriculture. So once again, P&C, food, beverage, and agribusiness. What separates us? We're a specialty segment that focuses exclusively on, once again, food, beverage, agriculture, and agribusiness. And because of our specialization, we provide targeted value add solutions for our clients. Our specialist knows and understand. I'm a specialist as well, but our other additional specialists, they know and understand the industry, the market conditions, the operating cycles, the seasonalities, the highs, the lows, the growths, what's going on in the industry. And when I say other specialists, we have a treasury management officer that helps with receivables and payables, and all they do is work with clients in the ag and the greens industry. So they will have on average about 20 appointments a week. And based on those appointments, they've seen everything from A to Z. So whenever you have a situation, you may have a question, they will have an answer for you because they have seen this, they have seen your situation, and they've heard your question. They'll have answers for you. And also another one of our partners is, or I don't say partners, but one of our specialists, the underwriters. We have our own agriculture underwriters, whereas they only underwrite food and beverage and agriculture and agribusiness applications for lending. We currently have 3 underwriters, and between the 3 ag underwriters, they have well over 60 plus years of underwriting experience between them. So once again, what makes that special for our group, they're not underwriting healthcare, they're not underwriting lawyers or any other type of industry. All they focus on, once again, is the greens industry and food and beverage. And I really believe that's one of the things that really separate us or differentiate us from some of the other banks. Some other banks, they have they might have someone here or there that may have experience or maybe working with landscapers or nursery here and there, but we have a whole team. On my team is pretty much from New York all the way down to Florida. And my manager, I can get on the phone with him and call him, email him, text him, and he'll be able to reply back to me within the hour. And then his manager, who sits in Birmingham, Alabama, I have him on the speed dial as well. So even though PNC, we're not as large as a Chase, or we're not a small bank, however, we're a big bank that does have that small bank component to it. So, and I think what I've realized with a lot of my clients and prospects that I've reached out to, either they're with us now, but in the past is with a smaller bank, because they like to have that small bank feel. But that's something that we do present and we do provide to our clients here at PNC. Any questions on that bullet point? All right. So how is agricultural lending different than traditional underwriting? I think I kind of alluded to that. We have underwriters who specifically underwrite strictly agriculture, greens industry deals, as opposed to traditional underwriting. And also they understand, what I stated earlier, they understand the operating cycles, the seasonalities of the business. I know earlier, Judd asked a question in reference to lines of credits and utilization. So once again, we understand with landscapers, the busy time of the year for them is in the spring. So you understand that a line of credit will be utilized heavily between March and June, probably July, really, before things really heat up. So we know that the line of credit may get maxed out between that time, but then we also expect to see that line of credit will be paid down between June and August, but then we know things may pick up again in September for the fall season. So once again, we understand the seasonalities, and that's also the reason why we could structure lines of credits, whereas you could pay them back monthly, semi-annually, annually. So we do have different structures in place specifically because we understand the seasonality. Like I have a couple of pecan growers down in South Alabama. Once again, we understand when it's harvesting time, they're gonna really utilize that line of credit. And once they get paid, we know that, hey, they're gonna make a big payment, pay down on the line, or peanut harvesting season. So we understand the seasons and when the line of credit will be used. So, for example, we may look at a doctor, and the doctor may, I'm just saying in general, traditional underwriter will probably like to see a doctor utilize a line of credit up and down. You use it, you pay it, you use it, you pay it, you use it, you pay it, as opposed to within our space, we understand the seasons and the seasonalities and the reason why you may utilize a line, and it might be maxed out for 3 months, but we understand within, a month or two of that, the line should be paid down. And also, with our landscapers and nursery growers and everything else. Any questions so far? All right.
Hey, Sean, let me, and I should ask you this on the earlier thing, but you hit on a very important point. You talked about the diversity of the industry, and that is so universally true, especially in the state of Georgia. You mentioned various row crops and nut crops, but also from the green industry standpoint, you mentioned nurseries, you got sod growers, you have the landscapers, you have construction outfits, you have chemical fertilizer dealers, equipment dealers. I mean, the diversity is incredible. And a lot of people don't recognize that. So I just tip my hat to you and Honore and the PNC team for understanding what those challenges are and the seasonality of the operation and when their returns are high and when they're low, and being able to work them through that. So I just wanted to commend you for the recognition and the interest in working through those variabilities within this very unique but also very, very strong industry. So thank you for that.
Yes. No, I know, absolutely. That's why for me and a lot of other industries, a lot of businesses, they face some hard times, like many of us have seen during since March. But my clients, they've been booming. They've been doing good, especially with the landscapers and the growers, or they've been doing very well. And that's also to Nori's point earlier that within the ag space is definitely a segmentation that at PNC we're very interested in, and we have a heavy heart and interest within that space. But last but not least, I just want to just touch base on some of the successes that we've had here at PNC in 2020, just some that have been done post-COVID. I mean, COVID isn't over. However, we've had some lines of credits that have been approved for landscapers, owner-occupied commercial real estate for landscapers. I have another client where they deal in specialty foods, and they've had approved for a line of credit and equipment line of credit. So we've had wins this year during COVID. So once again, the shop isn't closed. It's not like, well, COVID is here and we're no longer lending. We're lending, but to Honori's point earlier, it's just we're looking at things a little tighter than we did. The thresholds are a little different than what it used to be pre-March of this year. However, we are still here. We're here to consult, to lend, and to be an advisor and an advocate. Whomever would like to, sit down and talk to Honore or myself or both of us at the same time, because Honore and I, we work together, and once again, we're here for UAC or any potential UAC members, and just anyone that's viewing this webinar for today. So that's the end of my piece, and thank you, Brian and Mary Kay, for once again giving us this platform to present to UAC this afternoon.
Well, hey, thanks, guys, and we'll make sure that in the video that we include your contact information. We want to make sure that anyone that wants to reach out to you via your email, and they can make that connection. I know y'all will follow up with them. Just be sure and mention you're a UAC member when you email them. That way they'll be able to make that. Yeah,
definitely. Definitely. You can definitely share our cell phone numbers as well. In case they want to reach out to us directly.
Yeah, we'll be happy to do that and make sure that everyone can get in touch with you as easy as possible. Okay, before we wrap up, we do have that one final video. Quality of the plants that we're seeing from Proven Winners is it's outstanding. And so I want to roll this video for you, and my final thank you to Proven Winners. And here's the video.
Welcome back to the research fields here at Spring Meadow Nursery. Once again, I'm Dr. Judson LeCompte, and we are going over our 4 new introductions of Hydrangea paniculata. Next up, we've got Quickfire Fab. Going on with the name of Quickfire, this is one of the first of our Hydrangea paniculatas to come into flower. It's going to start out with a nice creamy color, and as we age into summer, we're going to start seeing watermelon pink come up from the bottom of the inflorescence, and then it works its way all the way to the top. As we get closer into fall, this whole inflorescence is going to be a lovely pink. Another fun fact about this one, the flowers are what we call cruciform. They're shaped like a cross or like a crucifix. So you can always spot it out because it's got these cruciform flowers. Again, it's got really upright habit, strong stems that are not going to flop over with the large inflorescence. It is really going to give you full season color from spring to fall. Quickfire Fab is going to come into flower earlier than the original Quickfire, and it even has a denser mop head flower, sure to give you more impact in the garden. For our growers, this is a great opportunity for you to get early season color into the garden centers. We know the garden centers are busy early in the season, and we want to have a paniculata available for our customers to purchase. Generally with Hydrangea paniculatas, we say that they can be grown in zones 3 to 8. If you're on those extremes, there's a few things you can do to protect your plant. If you're in that zone 3 location, plant it in a little bit of a protected area, even cover its roots with a little bit of mulch, so the base of the plant with some mulch. That's going to help it go through the winter. If you're growing in zone 8, 7, and 8, I'm from there, it's hot, y'all. This plant will do well. Just put it in the shade. Put it on the east side of your house or on the north side of your house, just so that it is protected from that afternoon sun. We're excited to have Quickfire Fab as another installment into the Quickfire family. Make sure to look for it early in the season.
That's good stuff. I hope y'all enjoyed that, and thanks again for y'all's time, and thanks for being a partner with the Urban Ag Council. PNC has done a terrific job in helping on this financial literacy series, so you guys have been great. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.